Celtics fall to the Blazers. 20 turnovers, brutal clutch, and life without Tatum. Trade for a big. If you are a Celtics fan, I know exactly how you finished this game, with that feeling of, we delivered. It was 114-108 for the Blazers, and it wasn't for lack of talent. There were 20 turnovers, horrible decisions in the clutch, and 29% from the perimeter, the kind that hurts to see. And even with Jaylen Brown playing a lot, it was clear how big the hole was without Tatum. There was a lack of control, a lack of rebounding, a lack of calm. Now the question is, was this just a strange night? Or is it a real warning from a team that wants a title? Stay with me because I'll show you where Boston lost the game, what changes with Tatum's return, and why a trade for a center rebounder could be the missing piece for this team to dominate again. If you enjoy this type of direct, no-nonsense analysis, I only ask you one thing before continuing. Subscribe to the channel now. It's not long before we reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and I'll be very transparent. Reaching 1,000 subscribers helps the channel to grow a lot. This increases our reach, makes YouTube recommend videos more, and allows us to invest more time and quality in Celtics analysis. If this content helps you, give me that strength. Click subscribe, leave a like, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next analyses. And quickly comment, for you, what hurt the most in this game, the turnovers or the clutch? Now let's go to the video, because there is something important here that explains this defeat a lot. Let's talk as a fan, because this game against the Portland Trail Blazers was one of those that leaves a bad taste that doesn't go away easily. You watch until the end with the feeling that the Celtics will find a way, because this squad has already proven that it knows how to resolve games. But this time, the clock was running down, the mistakes were piling up, and when we realized it, the defeat was fixed. 114-108. And what bothers us most is not losing. What bothers me is losing the way it was. I want to start this episode of the Celtics Talk Show by being straight with you. This game was a portrait of things that almost never come up when Boston is at its best. It was a set of factors that isolated could even be overcome, but together they turned into an ugly fall. There were too many turnovers. There were bad decisions at the most important moment. There was a use of three well below standard, and above all, there was the impression that there was a lack of someone to organize the team when the game called for calm. And yes, this absence has a name, Jayson Tatum. But before we go to the why, I need to take you through the how, because that is where the most painful part lies, and at the same time, the most useful part for thinking about a solution. It's not drama. It's not exaggeration. It's looking at what happened and understanding why a team that usually controls matches ended up putting itself in a situation where it needed to be perfect in the end to make up for its own mistakes. If someone just looks at the score and says there was a lack of talent, I completely disagree. The Celtics didn't lose due to lack of quality. The Celtics lost because they gave away too many possessions, because they gave life to a young, athletic opponent, and because when they reached the final minutes, they looked like a team without an anchor. When you give that kind of space, any NBA team has courage. And that's how games that seemed manageable turn into problems. You allow your opponent to believe. The number that defines this defeat is simple and heavy. 20 turnovers. 20. This is not a detail. It is a sentence. Even more so when you remember that the Celtics during the season had stood out for precisely the opposite, for being one of the teams that best takes care of the ball, that plays cleanly, that executes without wasting possession. That's one of the reasons Boston wins so much. Because when this team is minimally organized, it imposes a type of pressure that is difficult to respond to. He shoots well, turns the ball around, doesn't give away easy points, makes the opponent work for every attack. Against Portland, that turned on its head. There were 20 turnovers for 19 assists. And this imbalance is the kind of thing that doesn't suit a team that sees itself as a contender. And what makes it worse is that it wasn't just forced errors the whole time. There was a lack of communication. There were passes without conviction. There were delayed readings. There were hasty decisions. Turnover in practice is not just losing the ball. Turnover is giving possession for free. It's offering transition. It's allowing layups, fouls, free three balls, It's the type of error that accelerates the opponent and dismantles their defense. And when you lose by 6 points, any small sequence of errors like that becomes huge. This is where a trap comes in that catches a lot of modern teams, and the Celtics are not immune. When you commit too many turnovers, you start to depend on a very high use of threes to compensate. It's as if the team said, okay, we're making mistakes, but we're going to shoot so well that it won't matter. But this is not a plan. This is hope. And against Portland, that compensation didn't come. The Celtics shot 29% from 3. On other nights, even though they made more mistakes than usual, Boston managed to survive because the outside ball dropped in volume and efficiency. But when you combine a bad night of 3 with a bad night taking care of the ball, you're asking for a loss. And that's exactly what happened. This is an important conversation for anyone thinking about the title, because contenders cannot live in perfect conditions. Contender wins ugly game too. Contender wins when the ball doesn't fall. Contender stays standing when the opponent settles everything for one night. Contender goes through difficult journeys without turning it into an excuse. To do this, you need foundation and consistency. Take care of the ball, control the rhythm, execute in half court, and close the rebound. And the Celtics in this game failed in the two things that hurt most in playoffs: control and closure. And the end of the match was a portrait of this lack of control. Anyone who watched the last minute and barely knows exactly what I'm talking about. The sequence of errors was heavy, and it was not the kind of error that you accept as it happens. There was a turnover at a decisive moment. There was confusion. There was a ball thrown away. There was a foul in transition. What stands out most is that it didn't seem like an isolated problem with just one player. It seemed like a failure of communication and collective reading. It seemed like a team that didn't have a clear reference to say, calm down, let's do it the right way. When the game gets tough, you need routine, not improvisation. You need clarity, not tentativeness. And that's where Jayson Tatum's absence weighs heavily in a way that doesn't always appear in the box score. It's not just about the points. It's about emotional and tactical control. It's because of the ability to reduce chaos. It's because he's the guy who, on nights like this, holds the ball, chooses the best attack, helps with rebounds, stabilizes the team. There is a huge difference between making excuses and understanding context. I don't like excuses. The Celtics need to win games like this, but it's also impossible to ignore what Tatum represents when the match requires calm in the final minutes. Without it, this role needs to be divided. However, the team is not always able to assume this naturally, especially against an opponent who is playing lightly, loosely, with energy. And what makes it even more frustrating is that Jaylen Brown had a huge game, a star game. He was aggressive, scored efficiently, carried the attack for long periods, and delivered a performance that, in general, is accompanied by victory. I know he had turnovers too, and you can't pretend that didn't happen. But when a player has high usage, creating, attacking, taking responsibility, turnovers can appear. The problem is that the team is unable to turn a performance of this size into a victory due to lack of support and collective errors at the decisive moment. This is the kind of defeat that irritates because it seems like a waste. You look and think, on a night when our guy delivered all of this, how did we not win? And here comes another point that little by little is becoming an alert: the bottle and the rebounds. There is no way to escape this subject. The Celtics are having difficulty controlling rebounds and protecting the paint with consistency. In some games, this passes because the team shoots well, doesn't make mistakes, and the execution covers holes. But when the night gets messy, this disability comes into focus. You know that offensive rebound that changes the course of the game, that putback that kills hope. This happens when you don't close the possession. And closing possession is a detail that separates a good team from a champion team. In a tight game, an extra possession is worth its weight in gold. That's why this game, despite being just one more in the regular season, raises questions that are valid for the rest of the year. Are these Celtics title contenders? I'll answer you honestly. As it stands today, the Celtics are a strong, competitive team capable of winning series. But title contender is another level because it requires margin to survive bad nights. Without Tatum, that margin shrinks. With a bottle that still doesn't give you security on the rebound, it decreases more. but the East is open, and that's the part that keeps hope very much alive. There is no such thing as an unreachable bogeyman. There are a group of good teams, each with their strengths and flaws. And Boston, even with problems, still has the structure to transform into something more solid if two things happen. Tatum returns, and the squad is adjusted where it really needs to be. When a star returns, it's not just putting points on the scoreboard. It's about returning identity and hierarchy. It's about making the team more organized. It's allowing each player to fulfill a clearer role. And basketball, in the end, is that good people doing good things in the right place, at the right time. I'm not going to invent a schedule because it changes, and we know it. But the reading is simple. If the Celtics believe that Tatum will return this season, the team needs to prepare for his return to be a real turning point, and not just an emotional relief. And then comes the topic that always divides fans: exchange. I understand the discomfort of talking about change after a defeat because it seems like a reaction. But here, it's not a whim. It is a structural necessity. Boston needs more presence in the paint and more rebounding. You need someone who can help close out defensive possessions and give consistent minutes when the game gets tight. They need a profile that complements what this team already does well, because the Celtics already have perimeter talent and the ability to score. What's missing is stability in some areas that, in playoffs, are life or death: rebounding, physicality, and execution without waste. While the board decides whether to move or not, there is something that the team itself can correct now. Because 20 turnovers is not destiny, it is a repeated bad choice. The Celtics need to get back to the simple, safe passing, quick reads, less unnecessary risk. You need to treat the clutch as a routine and not as an improvisation, with clearer attacks and well-defined responsibilities. You need to assume that rebounding doesn't belong to the pivot. It belongs to the entire team, especially when they lack size. And above all, you need to regain emotional control so that a bad sequence doesn't become a domino effect. The question I leave you with, really, is this. For you, was this game just a strange night? One of those crooked, long travel games? Or was it a warning of how the Celtics can suffer when Tatum isn't there and when the big man doesn't close the possession? I want to hear from you because this is the discussion that counts. It's not about choosing someone to blame. It's about identifying pattern, cause, and path. If you've stuck with me this far, it's because you're as invested as I am in understanding where this team is going. And I promise you that here at the Celtics Talk Show, we will face the truth when defeat hurts, but we will also keep our heads on straight because the season is long and good teams learn. Now tell me, what bothered you most against the Blazers, the turnovers, the clutch, or the rebounds? And if you could choose a priority to change this season, would you bet on Tatum's return, a trade for a center rebounder, or immediate adjustments to execution at the end of the game? And that's why this defeat needs to hurt in the right way. Not to create panic, not to point fingers, but to serve as a warning. Because the Celtics didn't just lose one game. The Celtics exposed exactly the kind of mistake that, in a playoff series, costs an entire season. When you give the ball away 20 times, when you enter the clutch without clarity, and when you don't secure possession on the rebound, you stop controlling the game and start depending on luck. And a team that wants a title cannot live on luck. Now, the answer to this is not despair. It's adjustment. It's maturity. It's understanding that a contender's margin for error is too small to repeat a night like that. Jaylen Brown showed that he can carry the ball and win, but the team needs to give him back a scenario in which a performance of this size becomes victory, not frustration. And when Tatum returns, the conversation will change, but it will only really change if the Celtics correct what they are shouting: care with the ball, execution at the end, and presence in the paint. If you want to continue this discussion with me, I'm going to ask you something very simple. Go to the pinned comment and click on the Celtics Analyses playlist. There, I left the most complete analyses with context, pattern, and what this means for the rest of the season. Watch the next video on the playlist now because it connects with everything that happened today and gives you the clearest vision of this team's path from now on. That's what the Celtics Talk Show is. No nonsense. Reading the game and the truth that we need to hear. See you in the next video. And until then, let's see if this team responds to how to compete.